I cannot believe you did this again!
So picture this. I'm on the phone, pressed to my ear, literally walking state prosecutors through details of government corruption when an HOA Karen and her teenage son come marching up my driveway. They demand, like it's the most natural thing in the world, that I hand over the keys to my Harley for the good of the community. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with motor oil filled the garage, while outside morning dew sparkled across my $25,000 restored Heritage soft ale. I'm mid-sentence with the attorney's office about municipal bid rigging when this kid, who's already failed his driver's test twice, points at my bike and says, "My mom thinks you should let me take this to prom." She nods along, as if this is completely logical. It's community service, Mr. Bellwether. Sharing is caring. I'm convinced it's a prank until she actually dials 911 on me while I'm talking to prosecutors about corruption. Imagine that. What would you do if an entitled HOA president tried to hijack your call with law enforcement to steal your motorcycle? Drop a comment with where you're watching from and whether your neighborhood has ever gotten this crazy. Let me rewind and explain how I landed in this mess. Name's Marcus Bellwether, though most folks just call me Tank. I put in 20 years, with the Marines mostly as a diesel mechanic, fixed everything from Humvees to generators in places where warranty void didn't mean a thing. After my divorce wrapped up, I used the settlement to buy a modest ranch in Willowbrook Estates. It looked like the perfect place to start fresh. The Harley? That's my dad's. He was a Vietnam vet, Purple Heart recipient, who lost his battle. With cancer 3 years ago, he left me his 1998 Heritage soft ale and about 15 boxes of original parts. I spent nearly every weekend for 3 years rebuilding it. Fresh paint, new engine, a custom leather seat shaped to my hands like a prayer. When I fire her up, that low V-twin rumble doesn't just sound like a motorcycle, it sounds like freedom. On paper, Willowbrook Estates was idyllic. Middle-class subdivision, artificial lake, winding trails, speed bumps every couple hundred yards to keep the kids safe, perfectly trimmed lawns, identical mailboxes, that peaceful suburb image straight. Out of an ad, what they don't tell you, 7 HOA board members collecting $180 a month just to dictate shutter colors. Enter Constance Thornfield, Connie to her friends, though I'm pretty sure that list is shorter than she imagines. Realtor, divorced mom, HOA president 4 years. Running, always unopposed, because nobody else wants the headache. She's got the bleached blonde bob, oversized sunglasses permanently parked on her head, and a white BMW X5 with vanity plates that scream TR1. Her specialty? Emails that sound polite but leave you feeling like garbage. Connie swears the rules don't apply the same way to what she calls quality residents. She runs the Architectural Review Committee with an iron grip and seems unusually chummy with Jim Kratzky, our local code enforcement officer. More on him later. My introduction to Connie's brand of justice came 3 weeks after I moved in. Certified letter claiming my Harley violated the commercial vehicle restriction under Bylaw 7.3b. Apparently, my motorcycle was being treated the same as running a full-on business from my garage. Meanwhile, my neighbor's plumbing van sat parked 24/7, and the landscaper across the street left his trailer full of mowers at the curb daily. Not to mention Connie's BMW covered in magnetic real estate signs every weekend. I replied politely, attached photos of actual commercial vehicles, and asked for fair enforcement. The result? Emergency board meeting, second violation notice, $150 fine. The fumes from my neighbor's work truck hung heavy in the air while I photographed his non-commercial Ford F-350 with Martinez Plumbing painted right on the doors. The irony was so thick it was almost funny. Almost. Then there's Bradley, Connie's 16-year-old son and apparently the future of America. Kid's flunked his driver's test twice, crashed his mom's car into a mailbox, and once drove his dad's truck straight through a fence. Yet somehow he's convinced he's ready for a Harley. He's been obsessed with mine since day one, always tossing comments about old guys hoarding the cool rides. The first time he approached me, I was washing the bike in the driveway. He strolls up, hands shoved in his pockets, and casually suggests I loan it to him for prom. I explained the obvious, insurance liability, and offered to walk him through the engineering instead. He gave me that look teenagers get when they realize the world doesn't revolve around them, then sulked off muttering about selfish veterans and how his mom was right about the neighborhood's problem residents. That was on a Saturday. By Tuesday, I had 4 separate violation notices stuffed into my mailbox. The pattern was becoming clear, but I still didn't realize how deep the rabbit hole went, or that my calls with the state attorney's office were about to hit a little. Too close to home. Within 2 weeks of the first notice, Connie kicked off what I can only describe as a selective enforcement campaign straight out of a Soviet playbook. She rallied her little army of concerned neighbors. And by concerned, I mean bored housewives with nothing better to do than track my every move. Suddenly, violation letters were arriving faster than junk mail. Grass supposedly a 1/4 inch. Too tall, even though I measured it at 2 3/4, well within the 3-inch limit. Garbage cans visible from the street for 3 hours after pickup, despite collection not happening until noon, and everyone else's bins. Staying out all evening. Excessive maintenance noise for changing my Harley's oil on a Saturday. Every citation came stamped with a $150 fine and wrapped in so much legalese it could strangle a junior paralegal. Before long, my mailbox looked like a crime scene stuffed with certified envelopes, while my neighbor's identical infractions somehow slipped under the radar. The sharp stench of diesel from Martinez's plumbing truck tangled with the sugary perfume of Mrs. Patterson's wild honeysuckle as I snapped photos of the hypocrisy. Her lawn stood taller than mine, and the guy 2 doors down had been pressure washing his driveway every weekend for a month straight. That's when I met Elena Rodriguez, my next-door neighbor, and the first person who made me feel like I wasn't losing my mind. Elena, a single mom working night shifts as a nurse, was raising twin 7-year-olds who behaved like saints compared to Bradley Thornfield. One evening, she knocked on my door, thanking me for jump-starting her car during the March ice storm. She handed me a homemade tamale that smelled like heaven and said, "I've been watching what Connie's been doing to you." She laid it out plain. This wasn't new. Connie had pulled the same stunts with the Hendersons before they left, with the Washingtons and with the elderly couple who once lived where the Kramers are now. Elena had picked up on something I had overlooked, Connie's willful blindness to her own son's behavior. Bradley partied every weekend, blasting music loud enough to rattle windows 3 houses over. He left beer cans scattered across the community walking trail and had already dented Mr. Aiden's garage door with his mom's BMW. Yet he'd racked up 0 violations, 0 fines, 0 accountability. That's when I decided to fight back, with documentation. My evenings turned into long hours combing through HOA meeting minutes, budget reports, and architectural review records. The steady clack of my keyboard blended with the constant bubbling of the overworked coffee percolator. Back in the Marines, we had a saying, proper preparation prevents piss-poor performance. Time to put that principle into action. What I uncovered made my blood boil. There were clear patterns. Connie approving her friends' requests while denying identical ones from ordinary homeowners. Board members' pool permits, approved instantly. Families like mine, delayed 6 months, fence changes, rubber-stamped for her poker buddies, rejected for working folks under vague aesthetic excuses. One memory from deployment surfaced. A JAG officer once told us that targeting service members could violate federal discrimination laws. I reached out to Sarah Aiden, a housing discrimination attorney who specialized in HOA abuse. My Marine buddy had been right. Harassment of a veteran could trigger Fair Housing Act investigations with heavy federal penalties attached. But things really got interesting when I started cross-referencing recent property sales with violation records. That's when the mechanic in me began connecting the wires. 3 homes had sold through Connie's real estate agency in the past year. All 3 owners had suddenly been bombarded with violations right before listing. All 3 sold below market value in quick deals, and every sale padded Connie's commission checks nicely. It was like diagnosing a busted engine. Once you spot the recurring flaw, the corruption in the whole system becomes glaring. This wasn't sloppy HOA politics. It was a calculated scheme to manipulate real estate. Meanwhile, Bradley had doubled down on his motorcycle fixation. One afternoon, he showed up with 3 buddies, clearly trying to lean on me with peer pressure. He claimed other cool neighbors let kids borrow their rides all the time. When I calmly explained insurance laws and liability for the second time, he launched into a full-blown tantrum in my driveway. "You're hoarding something that should benefit the whole community," he yelled, loud enough for half the street to hear. "My mom says people like you are what's wrong with America." My grip tightened on the wrench, slick with chain grease. Hearing him echo his mother's words verbatim hit me hard. This wasn't just teenage arrogance, it was orchestrated. As Bradley stormed off with his little entourage, I made a decision. No more playing defense. It was time to gather hard evidence, the kind that holds up in court and ends corrupt careers. Because if 2 decades in the Marines taught me anything, it's that bullies only understand one response: overwhelming force, delivered at exactly the right time. 3 days after Bradley's public meltdown, things spiraled into an entirely new level of corruption. I was in my garage, halfway through changing the oil on my truck, when a city vehicle rolled up. Out stepped Jim Kratzky, our local code enforcement officer, clipboard in hand, doused in bargain bin cologne thick enough to choke a horse, strutting around like he owned the block. "Got an anonymous tip about a home business," he announced without so much as a hello. "Need to inspect the property for violations." Anonymous complaint? Yeah, right. The timing was about as subtle as a brick crashing through glass. Kratzky began snooping through my garage like he was on a treasure hunt, desperate to find some minor infraction to pin me with. The mix of motor oil fumes and his cut-rate aftershave was enough to turn my stomach. I wanted to throw every door and window wide open. This time, though, my habit of digging into records paid off. The night before, I'd been browsing public marriage records. Don't ask why, just following a gut feeling, and discovered that Kratzky's brother had married Connie's sister in 2018. Small world, huh? So much for impartial enforcement. Eventually, Kratzky zeroed in on some oil stains in my driveway. "Environmental hazard," he declared with all the authority of a guy who probably couldn't change his own oil filter. "Groundwater contamination. Violation of Municipal Code 15.7c, I nearly laughed. The stains were the same kind every mechanic in America has dealt with since Ford rolled out the Model T. Instead, I kept quiet and documented every second. Back in Iraq, I learned that corrupt officials always overreach sooner or later. You just need patience to catch them in the act. Meanwhile, I was digging deeper into the neighborhood's past. Elena introduced me to Dorothy Walsh. Dot to her. Friends, a retired paralegal who'd moved into Willowbrook 3 years earlier. At 67, with sharp eyes and silver hair, nothing slipped past her. Dot had been quietly tracking Connie's activities, and her legal background gave her a unique perspective. 23 years in family court, she told me over coffee at her kitchen table, surrounded by law books and folders. "I know a scheme when I see one. Your HOA president isn't just power-hungry. She's running a racket." Dot walked me through the mechanics of HOA liens, something I'd never considered before. Turns out unpaid HOA fines don't just vanish, they stick to your property like unpaid taxes. Rack up enough of them and foreclosure becomes a real threat. Most homeowners don't realize how dangerous those little violation notices can become, until it's too late. We spent that afternoon cross-referencing property records with HOA financials. The pattern jumped out immediately. Harassment led to fines, fines became liens, liens forced distressed sales, and those sales generated real estate commissions. Connie had turned her HOA presidency into a personal flipping empire. But here's the kicker. Dot uncovered that Connie's real estate company had been buying up HOA liens from the association at 50 cents on the dollar, then weaponizing those very liens to foreclose on neighbors. She was literally arming herself to destroy lives, then cashing in on the wreckage. 8 properties in 3 years, Dot said, sliding a manila folder across the table. All the same playbook, all sold through her agency after foreclosure. It was mechanical in its precision, like diagnosing an engine failure once you know the system. Connie had weaponized bureaucracy itself. That night, I was setting up a new security camera system in my garage, Amazon's best motion-activated gear, when I heard someone fumbling outside. 2 a.m. I opened the door to find Bradley Thornfield trying to hotwire my Harley with what looked like a bent coat hanger. He'd even knocked the bike over, scraping the kickstand along the concrete. This wasn't just any bike. It was my father's heritage Softail, his legacy. Seeing some spoiled kid treat it like a toy made my blood boil. Bradley was still struggling to lift the weight when my motion lights blasted on. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I barked. He stammered something about protecting the bike from thieves, like breaking into my garage at 2 a.m. was some kind of favor. The damage wasn't catastrophic, just a few scratches, maybe $400 in paint repairs. But the violation was personal. I could have called the cops. Maybe I should have. Instead, I documented everything. Photos, video, the whole 9 yards, and sent him home with a warning. Because sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the one you use right away. It's the one you hold back for the perfect moment. By this point, Connie realized I wasn't going to fold like her past victims. So she escalated, launching a full-on social smear campaign designed to turn the neighborhood against me. She painted me as the unstable veteran with anger issues, dangerous to kids and property values. Suddenly, rumors were flying that I had PTSD, violent outbursts, that I was a threat. She discouraged neighbors from talking to me, cloaking her poison in fake concern. At the mailbox, she'd corner people. "I'm just worried about everyone's safety, you understand?" At the monthly HOA meeting, I watched her put on a performance worthy of an award. Fresh mulch scented the air, hedge trimmers buzzed in the background, and Connie, dressed to the nines, stood at the podium, nails tapping for emphasis, camera rolling for transparency. She pushed for an emergency. Connie had been breaking her own bylaws for years. The association's rules required a 2/3 majority to pass new restrictions, yet she pushed them through with nothing more than a simple majority. That meant several of the HOA's recent rulings were invalid from the start, thanks to improper voting. From my time in the military, I knew all too well that procedural missteps could unravel entire operations. The same logic applied here. If Connie refused to follow the HOA's governing documents, then her rulings held no legal authority. I didn't reveal this knowledge right away, though. I tucked it away, waiting for the exact moment to use it. That opportunity almost came during Bradley's boldest stunt yet. I had driven out to visit my elderly aunt in the next county, hoping for a quiet weekend far from HOA nonsense. What I didn't anticipate was Bradley treating my absence as an open invitation to break into my garage. He had apparently picked up lockpicking skills from YouTube, modern education at its finest, and decided he was going to borrow my Harley for a joyride with his girlfriend. The lockpicks felt awkward in his sweaty, trembling hands as he fumbled with the garage door, no doubt picturing himself as some kind of teenage outlaw. Unfortunately for him, my upgraded security system had other plans. The silent alarm tripped. The moment he touched the lock, instantly notifying Elena and alerting the local police. 6 minutes later, the cops pulled up. Not bad for a suburban force on a Saturday night. They found Bradley caught in the act, surrounded by lockpicking. Tools, with every move captured on crystal-clear security footage. His hands shook as the officers cuffed him, his borrowed picks scattering across the floor like damning proof of intent. Connie showed up minutes later in her BMW, probably monitoring the police scanner at this point. She tried spinning every excuse imaginable, claiming Bradley misunderstood, insisting he was just checking on the property, even suggesting I might have left the garage unlocked. But no amount of frantic explanations could compete with video evidence. Small-town cops may not have Ivy League degrees, but they know the difference between the truth and a cover-up. Breaking and entering caught on camera doesn't leave much room for imagination. When I got back Sunday evening, the officers briefed me on everything. The footage showed Bradley's lockpicking attempt in full detail. His phone even had YouTube tutorials still open. I could have filed felony charges then and there. Burglary tools, breaking and entering, attempted vehicle theft. But instead, I held back. This was only one piece of a much larger game. Moving too soon could tip Connie off to the bigger case I was quietly building. Sometimes patience is the sharpest weapon you can wield. 3 days after Bradley's arrest, Dot Walsh knocked on my door carrying a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. Her expression made it clear she meant business. 23 years as a paralegal had turned her into an expert at digging through records, and she laid her findings across my kitchen table. "Tank, you need to see this," she said. It's worse than we thought. Her research made my blood run cold. By cross-referencing property deeds, HOA financials, and business filings, she uncovered a scheme so calculated it could pass as a case study in corruption. Connie's scam was simple but devastating. First, she buried homeowners in bogus violations and fines. If those fines went unpaid, and who has thousands to spare for grass-too-long citations, they became liens against the property. Then came the kicker. Connie's shell company, Community Asset Recovery, LLC, had been buying those liens from the HOA at half price. Think about it. She manufactured the violations, imposed the fines, then bought the resulting debts at a discount. It was like a loan shark loaning you money, then buying your IOU from himself at half its value. Once she controlled the lien, she could initiate foreclosure just like unpaid taxes. Facing crushing legal fees, desperate homeowners sold quickly at below-market rates. And guess which real estate agency handled those sales? Connie's. Guess who then scooped up properties through other LLCs, flipping them for 30 to 40% profit. Also, Connie bought 8 houses in 3 years, Dot showed me, each following the exact same blueprint, each lining Connie's pockets with commissions and profits. The total? $2.3 million in manufactured real estate deals. Our HOA wasn't just mismanaged, it was her personal money printing machine. And the neighbors never realized they were financing their own downfall. The best part? My consulting work with the state attorney's office meant I was already connected to the Public Integrity Unit. They had been tracking similar corruption across 3 counties. Suddenly, the evidence based on the files you shared, we're looking at possible RICO violations, mail and wire fraud, plus Fair Housing Act discrimination. That's squarely in federal prosecutor territory. The strategy we mapped out was razor sharp. Precise timing. Multiple points of pressure, maximum legal punch. Elena's role was community outreach, quietly contacting Connie's other victims and organizing a network of displaced homeowners. Dot kept digging through documents, building a timeline and linking every shady transaction. Sarah focused on drafting a sweeping civil lawsuit while I stayed in touch with the state attorney's office. But one piece was missing: media exposure. Dot mentioned her neighbor at KBTV, who suggested Janet Kim, an investigative reporter, already chasing HOA abuse stories statewide. Janet was known for uncovering corrupt officials who preyed on vulnerable homeowners, the exact situation we faced. On our first call, her energy was electric. "I've been waiting for a case like this," she said. "Clean paper trail, clear fraud pattern, sympathetic victims. This could reshape HOA law across the state." While our team was forming, I had a realization about public records. In Afghanistan, we used intel gathering to trace supply chain corruption, following the money to see who was stealing fuel or medical supplies. The same rules applied here. Every transaction leaves a trail, and persistence uncovers the truth. I started filing Freedom of Information Act requests with city, county, and state offices, HOA meeting notes, code enforcement complaints, property transfers, even Jim Kratzky's work history. The beauty of FOIA is simple. Officials can't hide behind privacy laws. Public business stays public, and they hate being reminded of it. That's when my old Marine buddy, Rico Santos, drove down from Dallas with surveillance gear that could make the NSA jealous. "Heard you've got neighborhood issues," he said, unloading boxes of cameras and audio rigs from his truck. Rico runs a private security firm specializing in corporate fraud, and that weekend we set up long-range microphones and cameras aimed at Connie's go-to lunch spot, Chez Leon. Every week she met there with Jim Kratzky and Councilman Rick Peaton. Since all our monitoring was done from public property using commercially available gear, it was fully legal under federal wiretap laws. The crash course I got from Rico was eye-opening. Modern surveillance doesn't need break-ins or hidden bugs. Telephoto lenses can capture license plates from half a mile. Parabolic mics can grab conversations through restaurant glass. And most of it ships overnight from Amazon. But the real breakthrough came from someone I never expected: Bradley's girlfriend, Madison Creek. Bradley had been boasting to her about his mom's business genius, laying out the whole property scheme like it was something to be proud of. Unlike him, Madison actually had a conscience. She'd been secretly recording their conversations. Through Elena's twins, who knew Madison from school, we set up a meeting. She showed up in my garage, shaking but determined, clutching her phone like it held nuclear codes. "Bradley told me everything," she whispered. "How his mom goes after people, drives them out, then scoops up their houses cheap. He thinks it's brilliant, but it's wrong, isn't it?" The recordings were devastating. Bradley's voice was clear, bragging about how his mother identified problem neighbors, fabricated violations, and leaned on code enforcement to force sales. He even laughed about a break-in attempt, calling it recon for future harassment. When Sarah heard the audio, she practically purred, "This is conspiracy to commit fraud with intent to strip homeowners of their property rights. Prosecutors, live for cases with evidence this airtight. Everything was lining up, community backing, legal strategy, press coverage, surveillance, and now taped confessions. The only thing left was timing." Connie had no idea her reign of intimidation was about to become a textbook case on how to dismantle corruption with its own tools. By then, she must have sensed something was off. I'd stopped paying her bogus fines, stopped answering violation letters. Worst of all, I kept showing up to HOA meetings smiling with that notebook in hand. The kind of smile that says, "I know something you don't." Desperation breeds mistakes, and Connie Thornfield was about to prove that in spectacular fashion. The sabotage attempt came on a Tuesday night. I was watching the evening news when Rico's system pinged my phone, motion in the garage, heat signatures by my bike. Pulling up the live feed, I saw Bradley crouched by my Harley, wrench in hand, carefully loosening the brake cables. Not just loosening, adjusting them so they'd fail gradually. The kid had actually researched it, probably the same way he learned lockpicking online. He wasn't trying to kill me, just set me up for a lesson about community obedience. The screech of metal on the feed made my stomach turn, but I let him finish. Sometimes the strongest evidence is letting the crime play out on camera. By the time he slipped out, I had 47 minutes of crystal clear footage showing premeditated sabotage of a vehicle, a Class C felony in Texas. Next morning, during my regular maintenance check, I spotted the tampering instantly. 2 decades of working on military vehicles makes sabotage jump out like a flare. I photographed everything, repaired the damage, and called Detective Morrison. The fingerprint team pulled Bradley's prints straight off the brake assembly. This wasn't teenage mischief anymore. After the break-in attempt, it was clear we were dealing with an escalating pattern of criminal behavior, one that could have easily ended in serious harm or even death. More telling, it revealed a deliberate conspiracy between Connie and her son to carry out felony crimes against their chosen neighbor. Connie's response to the police inquiry was a mix of sheer panic and self-righteous outrage. That very afternoon, she marched over to Elena's house, plastering on a fake smile while lacing her words with thinly disguised threats. Elena, anticipating trouble, recorded the entire exchange on her phone, capturing Connie's not-so-subtle warning that single mothers rely on community support that could vanish if they associated with troublemakers. From there, the witness intimidation charge practically wrote itself. Later that evening, Elena's hands trembled as she played me the recording, though her voice stayed steady. I'd seen bullies like this before in the hospital. They always overstep when fear takes over. Meanwhile, Connie had begun manipulating the HOA board, pushing them to threaten special assessments against anyone who didn't fall in line. She had discovered that HOA boards could levy emergency fees for nearly anything, and she intended to saddle Elena, Dot, and me with thousands in bogus community improvement charges aimed squarely at her loudest critics. But in her desperation, she made a critical misstep. She reached out to Tommy Williams, the editor of our small-town paper and her longtime poker buddy, asking for hit-piece coverage about the unstable veteran ruining neighborhood harmony. Connie wanted a front-page article linking PTSD to falling property values. What she didn't know was that Tommy's nephew had served in the same Marine unit as me, 2 tours after I left. Small world. Instead of running Connie's smear job, Tommy called me directly to fact-check her claims. That single call turned into his own independent investigation of her schemes, flipping her attempted media manipulation into yet another stream of evidence. Her next move came that Friday. Bribery. Connie showed up at my front door with a bottle of wine, her most practiced smile in place, and a proposal to settle things like good neighbors. She promised to drop all HOA fines and restrictions if I agreed to cooperate. The kicker? She dangled the prospect of exclusive contractor preference for HOA maintenance jobs worth thousands every month if I simply stopped causing problems. Classic quid pro quo corruption, dressed up like a friendly offer. My palms sweated as I gripped the recording device hidden in my pocket, but I kept my tone calm and interested. That sounds fair, Connie. Tell me more about how this contractor deal would work. What followed was 37 minutes of her explaining, in meticulous detail, the mechanics of her corruption, captured in perfect, crystal-clear audio. The final blow didn't come from me. It came from Bradley. Facing felony charges and the full weight of juvenile consequences, his attorney pushed him to cooperate in hopes of a lighter sentence. Under pressure, Bradley broke wide open. He not only confessed to his own crimes, but revealed his mother's explicit step-by-step instructions for the harassment campaign. Connie had even drafted a written playbook, a detailed property acquisition strategy complete with timelines, target profiles, and coordination protocols with Jim Kratzky. Even more damning, Bradley had saved recordings of Connie's phone instructions. For reference, creating a prosecutor's dream, an ironclad archive of evidence. The trap was set. Every piece was in place. All that remained was choosing the right moment to spring it. But a cornered animal is always the most dangerous, and Connie Thornfield was about to prove the point spectacularly. Her nuclear option was a full-blown character assassination. Campaign aimed at destroying my reputation before I could destroy hers. It began quietly, with whispers at the mailboxes about my supposed erratic behavior and late-night activities. Then it escalated into direct accusations that I'd threatened her and Bradley, insinuating that my military service had left me unstable and violent. She painted herself as a terrified single mother defending her son from a dangerous veteran unfit for civilian life. Her masterstroke, she thought, would be the media. Connie fed a carefully scripted story to Rick Martinez at the Tribune-Herald, a columnist known for community safety pieces. She gave him fabricated quotes about me frightening neighborhood kids and spun a narrative about PTSD endangering property values. But Connie miscalculated. Rick did his job. He called the sheriff's department, interviewed Elena and Dot, and even contacted my former Marine commander. When her story unraveled, Rick realized he was looking at something bigger, and he turned his investigation toward Connie instead. At the next HOA meeting, Connie's hands visibly shook as she realized her media strategy had blown up in her face. The woman who had dominated every narrative for 4 years was losing control, and the entire neighborhood saw it. Her last legal move was filing for a restraining order, accusing me of stalking and threatening her. The affidavit was a masterwork of lies, claims that I'd followed her car, made threatening gestures during her dog walks, and verbally harassed her in grocery store aisles. One fatal flaw, Rico's surveillance system had been logging my movements for weeks. Every single incident Connie described was disproven with time-stamped video, showing me in my garage, at Sarah Aiden's office, or visiting my aunt. Out of county. Her sworn statements weren't just lies, they were provable perjury, caught on camera. The restraining order hearing was something to behold. Sarah Aiden walked into court armed with a tablet full of video and GPS data, placing me hundreds of miles away during Connie's supposed encounters. Judge Henderson's expression shifted from doubtful to outright hostile as the evidence stacked up. "Mrs. Thornfield," he finally said, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades on the bench, "perjury in a sworn affidavit is a felony. I am dismissing this restraining order and referring your testimony to the district attorney." And then came the real breakthrough. Rico's parabolic surveillance of Connie's weekly lunch meetings captured the ultimate prize, the smoking gun we had been waiting for. I had crystal-clear audio of her conspiring with City Councilman Rick Peaton and Jim Kratzky to orchestrate my harassment. "The tank issue has to be handled before he causes serious damage," Connie's voice rang out distinctly through the restaurant window. "Jim, can you dig up building code violations? Rick, any possible zoning problems? He needs to be gone before he uncovers the full scope of our operation." Peaton's reply was just as damning. Acquiring property is a legitimate business tactic, but we can't risk one agitator unraveling the entire system. Maybe it's time we applied heavier pressure. The federal implications were immediate. For a RICO case, prosecutors need proof of ongoing criminal conspiracy. And here, it was captured on audio. When I shared the recording with my state attorney contact, his response was decisive. "We have to act on this right now." Meanwhile, Janet Kim's investigation was peaking. Her undercover footage caught Connie attempting to bribe Jim Katsky with Cowboys playoff tickets in exchange for pushing code enforcement against me and Elena. The evidence was so blatant it could make a prosecutor cheer. Community momentum was also turning. 23 homeowners signed a petition supporting me and documenting their own harassment. 3 families presented records proving they'd lost their homes to Connie's identical tactics. The neighborhood was finally waking up to what had been festering all along. Bradley's full cooperation tied everything together. Under his juvenile plea deal, he had to disclose every instruction his mother had given him, and he did. Phone recordings, text messages, even handwritten notes outlining surveillance assignments. Watching the betrayal between mother and son was brutal, but his lawyer had made it clear. Cooperation was his only path to avoiding adult felony charges. He chose survival over loyalty. I couldn't fault him. Connie had turned her own child into an accomplice. Everything was building toward a single collision point. Sarah Aiden had filed the sweeping civil lawsuit. Federal prosecutors were preparing RICO indictments. Janet Kim's expose was scheduled for the evening news, and the HOA had called an emergency meeting to address the growing crisis. The Willowbrook Community Center had never seen anything like it. What began as a routine HOA meeting became the neighborhood's version of the Super Bowl. Every seat filled, 50 more people pressed against the walls, many live streaming from their phones. The energy was electric. Half the crowd came to back Connie. The other half came to watch her fall. Janet Kim's KBTV crew set up near the back, cameras rolling. Detective Morrison and 2 federal agents sat quietly by the exit, blending in like relatives at a graduation, though they were there to make arrests. At exactly 7:00 p.m., Connie took the podium in her most expensive navy blazer, an outfit that probably cost more than a month's HOA dues. She had clearly rehearsed for hours. Her opening act was an award-worthy display of victimhood. "Friends and neighbors," she began, her voice quivering with forced emotion. "I stand before you tonight as a single mother terrorized by a dangerous individual living among us." She gestured toward me in the 3rd row, surrounded by Elena, Dot, and supporters. Her narrative painted her as the devoted community protector, fending off the unstable outsider who brought nothing but chaos. She described threats that never happened, harassment that only existed in her mind, and dangerous behavior that amounted to me working on my motorcycle in my own garage. Her loyalists clapped on cue, creating a staged theatrical moment that might have been laughable if it wasn't so manipulative. The performance had been carefully choreographed, seating charts, dramatic pauses, applause lines, every move designed for maximum camera effect. When she finished, I calmly walked to the podium holding nothing more than a manila folder. No theatrics, no raised voice, just facts. I connected my laptop to the projector. The room hushed. "Mrs. Thornfield has told you quite a story," I said, my voice steady through the sound system. "Now let me show you the truth." The first slide. A timeline of harassment. Every violation notice, every fine, every record of selective enforcement. The crowd murmured as the pattern became undeniable. Next came financial documents exposing Connie's property scheme, purchase dates, sale prices, commission figures. 8 families had lost their homes this way. I advanced to photos of displaced families. Mrs. Thornfield manufactured violations, levied fines, bought the liens at discount, and profited off forced foreclosures, I explained. The audience erupted in angry whispers as reality hit them. Then came the bombshell. Audio recordings of Connie's meetings with Katsky and Peaton. Her own voice filled the room. "Property acquisition is just good business. People who can't follow rules don't deserve to live in quality neighborhoods." Her face drained of color as her own words turned against her. She tried to shout over me, insisting the recordings were fake. But I kept going. Video of Bradley's break-ins, audio of her instructing him in harassment tactics, bank records tying her shell companies to HOA accounts. That's when Detective Morrison walked forward, his footsteps echoing through the silent room. Mrs. Thornfield, you're under arrest for RICO violations, mail fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and perjury. The snap of handcuffs rang out like a gunshot. Phones flashed as the moment was captured from every angle. Simultaneously, federal agents arrested Katsky and Peaton, who had foolishly shown up thinking they were still untouchable. "This is a mistake!" Connie screamed as cuffs tightened around her wrists. "I'm the victim! He's the criminal!" But no one was listening. The evidence was overwhelming, the documentation airtight, and her own voice had sealed her fate. The crowd erupted. Victims of her harassment stood applauding. Her once loyal backers sat stunned. Some people wept, families who had lost everything finally witnessing justice. Bradley appeared at the back of the room beside his juvenile attorney, looking far younger than his 16 years. With trembling hands, he stepped up to the microphone and read from a prepared statement, apologizing for his actions and admitting that his mother had pushed him into becoming her accomplice. Every moment was caught on Janet Kim's cameras. The arrests, the outrage from the community, the unveiling of the evidence, and most importantly, the reckoning of a broken system. Within hours, the footage spread like wildfire across social media. What had started as a neighborhood dispute quickly became a national symbol of everyday people standing up to corruption. As officers led Connie away in cuffs, she made one last, desperate attempt to seize control of the story. "This isn't over. I'll fight these charges. This community still needs real leadership." But it was over. 4 years of her reign collapsed with the snap of handcuffs and the cheers of a freed neighborhood. Resolution and epilogue. The transformation of Willowbrook Estates came faster than anyone expected. Within a week of Connie's arrest, the entire HOA board resigned in disgrace, triggering emergency elections that put Elena Rodriguez in the president's chair and Dot Walsh in the treasurer's seat. Their very first decision was to refund $180,000 in bogus fines to residents, money that had represented years of intimidation finally restored to its rightful owners. The new board completely rewrote the bylaws, prioritizing transparency and homeowners' rights over petty power trips. Within 6 months, property values climbed by 8% as word spread about our community's dramatic turnaround, from a nightmare HOA to a model of fair governance. For me, the victory was more than just legal triumph. Rebuilding my Harley, with Bradley as part of his community service hours, turned into a surprising path of healing for us both. The smell of penetrating oil, the sound of bolts tightening just right, and the steady rumble of my Softail in the driveway shifted from being tied to conflict to symbolizing freedom and renewal. Through the process, Bradley's true mechanical skill began to shine, buried for years beneath privilege and poor choices. 6 months later, my elderly aunt moved into the neighborhood, drawn by the warmth and unity that emerged after our battle against corruption. The legal aftermath was swift. Connie pleaded guilty to RICO charges, mail fraud, and conspiracy, earning 4 years in federal prison. Jim Kratzky was sentenced to 2 years, and City Councilman Rick Peaton faced separate municipal corruption trials. A civil RICO lawsuit also brought a $2.8 million judgment, which provided restitution for victims and funded lasting community improvements. One of the most meaningful outcomes was Bradley's redemption. He completed his 200 hours of community service working alongside me, maintaining neighborhood motorcycles and teaching safety. The same kid who once tried to steal my bike ended up becoming my apprentice, learning valuable life skills while making genuine amends. Our case soon became a national model for fighting HOA corruption. It even inspired new legislation in Texas requiring HOAs to maintain financial transparency, and a dozen other communities reached out for guidance on resisting abusive boards. What began as defending one motorcycle grew into a movement for grassroots justice. From the settlement funds, we built the Willowbrook Veterans Memorial Garden, a lasting symbol of healing. I led the design and construction, while Bradley organized teen volunteers who worked shoulder to shoulder with neighbors that had once been strangers. Out of shared struggle, we forged family. Elena and I discovered that our fight against corruption had also built something deeper. Mutual respect grew into love, and now we're planning a spring wedding in the Memorial Garden, surrounded by the neighbors who became our chosen family. The memorial even includes dedicated motorcycle parking for veteran riders, turning my Harley from a flashpoint of conflict into a source of community pride. Over 300 people attended the opening ceremony, including families who had once lost their homes to Connie's schemes, but had since returned to a renewed Willowbrook. The greatest lesson we carried forward was simple: documentation, organization, and knowledge can dismantle corruption. HOA bullies thrive on fear, isolation, and ignorance, but they fall apart when neighbors unite with evidence and persistence. Remember these 3 rules: document everything: photos, videos, written records. Never fight alone. Build alliances with others who are affected. Learn your rights under HOA law and state statutes. Knowledge is your strongest weapon. Bradley, now 17 and truly changed, summed it up best during his high school graduation speech. My mom taught me that power means controlling people. Tank showed me that real power means serving your community. The ripple effects continue. Our case is now studied in law schools. Janet Kim won regional journalism awards for her reporting, and Sarah Aiden shifted her entire practice to specialize in HOA corruption cases. We proved that ordinary people can hold corrupt officials accountable, no matter how untouchable they think they are. But our work isn't finished, just last week. Maria Santos from the next county called me about harassment tied to solar panel permits and manipulated building codes. Same corrupt playbook, different neighborhood. Looks like our Justice League has a new mission. That story, the solar panel scam, well, that's one for another day. And believe me, it's even more shocking than the one you just heard. Drop a comment with your worst HOA nightmare. You're not alone in this fight. Together, we can dismantle corrupt systems. Subscribe if you want to see more stories of ordinary neighbors standing up to officials who forgot they serve us, not the other way around. And if watching justice unfold gave you hope, hit that like button, share your thoughts below, and make sure you're subscribed. More outrageous neighborhood battles are right around the corner.